Everybody doing okay today?
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to our DFW NORML's March meeting at the J. Erik Jonsson Central Library in Dallas. That's a pretty big deal. You guys want to give that a hand? A lot of you have been saying for a long time that you'd like to see us outside of bars for our meetings, which we're totally on board with that. Finding places that will work are sometimes tricky. And so if this goes well, I like to think that hopefully we'll be able to come back to the library to host regular events here, assuming that's all right with you guys. That sound good?
Oh, yeah!
Okay, good. Well, do me a favor, let's be on our best behavior. Let's make sure that we're asked back. Let's be mega respectful. I know you guys are already going to do that, but I've asked you now. So if you don't, then you're kind of letting me down. So don't do that. But so who here is excited about marijuana law reform in Texas? So that's why you're spending your Saturday with us then, right? Rather than doing something like playing in the yard or, you know, enjoying this beautiful weather. You care about changing the laws in your community, which that's fantastic. We have that in common, and we are so close to actually doing something in Texas that we can smell it. Or that may just be me.
No.
But my point is, Dallas Cite and Release, just that close. I mean, how long has that been on the agenda for them to discuss that? Weeks? 10 weeks?
For them to discuss it?
For them to vote on this.
They put it on the, how long have they talked about it? At least 2-3 years.
2 or 3 years. And they've been kind of kicking the can down the road, right? And then all of a sudden, this week, days before we're meeting at the library of the very city that they're going to be changing marijuana policy for, they voted it down. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I think that's very interesting timing, actually. I think it's interesting that, obviously, people gathering in the community to discuss this is prompting some level of action from local government. Wouldn't you agree? And I think it's cool because while this is something that in one way could be viewed as a bit of a defeat, you know, in the sense that we could have been talking about not arresting these people for a 6-month pilot program. There's actually, after speaking with these gentlemen right here, this is Josh Gravens from Organized Justice. Yeah, give him a hand. And then Joe Swanson from ACLU of Texas, give him a hand. And these two gentlemen have been following this very closely for a long time now. And we had a conversation earlier in the week, I guess the day after the vote happened, where we pretty much had to pivot the content for what we were going to discuss here, because what we were planning on talking about is, you know, all the things that you should know when this thing passes. And as we know, it got voted down. But in a way, the way that it got voted down is actually kind of setting us up for a bigger victory, the three of us feel. And if you're reading between the lines, then you could see that this is actually kind of, in a way, a good thing. That it didn't happen the way that it was being suggested to happen. Is that exciting, that there's more to the story than Dallas just said no?
Yes.
I think so, because a lot of people don't get it. They'll see the 10-second Fox News spot on it that said whatever, Dallas said no, and then that's all there'll be to the story. But there's so much more to the story. And these two gentlemen have been following it so closely that I just felt like it was important to get them in front of you guys and on camera to explain the position that we're currently in with Cite and Release, now that it was voted down, and what we could make of this opportunity with the momentum that we've been gathering, both in the media as well as on city council, because to be clear, it was voted down 10-5. That means we were how many votes away from that passing? 3. 3 people. 2 of which at least had a problem just because their districts weren't included. That's not an insurmountable set of odds in my mind. I thought surely Dallas City Council would be a lot more challenging than that, wouldn't you? For marijuana? But no, that's not the case. And so these guys have been researching this and finding out what we need to know as citizens of the Metroplex so we can educate the people out there that don't know, that read the headline on Facebook maybe, and they feel like they're informed all of a sudden. Does anybody have friends like that who read the headlines and they feel like they're informed all of a sudden? Oh, Facebook. The greatest joke you ever played on us. Anyway, I'm just very excited for us to be here at the library. It's awesome that we're here talking about something so very relevant to the city of Dallas. in such an important building as the library, the very place where people go to get knowledge, to get information, and in a way to interact with their communities. So if you please join me in welcoming Josh Gravens and Joe Swanson to talk to us about Cite and Release.
I thought we were being rushed there for a minute. But no, it was the sign. Well, as Sean said, my name is Josh Gravens, and this is Joe Swanson. I'm with Organized Justice, and a brief intro there. Organized Justice is, the focus of the organization is criminal justice reform. And so I don't believe there's any better way to begin reforming our massive criminal justice system than with ending the war on drugs. And I think marijuana policy in particular has been a significant contributor to mass incarceration and incarcerating people that shouldn't be for many levels of reasons. I'm going to let Joe introduce himself.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Joe Swanson. I work for the ACLU of Texas. I'm a community organizer who works in the Dallas area as well as the North Texas region to try to advance civil rights and civil liberties that are protected under the Constitution of the United States. One of those things means recognizing that police officers are in fact agents of the state and therefore have certain barriers on what they can and can't do. And I think it would behoove us to also recognize that because that body, as well as several other bodies within the criminal justice system, or I should just say the criminal justice system in general, has promoted policies and works around policies that have put poor people and people in color in jail disproportionately higher than any other population, known as mass incarceration. We need to find a way to be smart on crime as well as break the system of oppression that the criminal justice system has had on folks throughout the entire country, but specifically on a very, very certain point of the population. So first, I want to kind of explain the background of Cite and Release and how it even came up as a possibility, even kind of what is Cite and Release, because everybody kind of has an idea, but the details get a little bit tricky based on what the legislature has said. So in the 80th legislature back in 2007, the state of Texas passed a policy saying that instead of taking people to jail, police will now be allowed to give people a ticket that has your summons date for when you would go to court for that offense, and then instead of taking you to jail, and they would just release you, and then you would come to court, and then you would either be you would be charged or not based on the outcome of that court case, right? So essentially taking away the point where people will be booked into jail and have an arrest record. And if we think about how this impacts people in poverty who can't afford to bail out, we're talking about 14 days in jail possibly, where you're waiting for your court date, where you are fired from work because you've been gone for 14 days, you haven't seen your family in 14 days, you've lost 14 days of income. And for a lot of families who are in poverty, that's not a possibility, and it's a question of, does the crime fit the punishment? And if you're caught with less than 4 ounces of marijuana on you, or you are in there for a nonviolent crime, we need to think of not just the 14 days and then whatever you get on top of that for your conviction. We need to think about this in terms of the fact that you might be fired from work. This could mean destruction for your entire family, right? And I'd like to point out now that one of the city council members said, instead of passing Cite and Release, why don't we just tell people, don't carry weed in the car? Okay, but at the same time, does the punishment fit the crime of taking somebody's job away and possibly ruining their family, especially since this is focused on families that are in poverty? So the Texas legislature passed this only for specific crimes, though. Some people think that this is only about marijuana possession. Actually, there are several crimes, including marijuana possession, Class A and B misdemeanors, criminal mischief, graffiti, theft, Class B misdemeanors, theft of service, contraband, and driving with a license that's invalid, right? So can you imagine going to jail and spending time in jail waiting to bail out, and you can't bail out because your license is invalid? Now, the city of Dallas had asked Chief Brown if he can put together, a potential pilot program. And let me emphasize that again, this is a pilot program. Was a pilot program that would only last for 6 months, and then they would evaluate it again. This is not something, this was the most non-committal thing that the city council could possibly do, right? So the police put this together with the purpose of, let me pull it up real quick, trying to reduce jail time, as well as the jail population, and reduce, and this is important, reduce the time that officers would spend on the street dealing with low-level crimes, right? To me, a gentleman came up to me earlier and said, there he is, it is infuriating to see somebody with a $40,000 squad car on the side of the street talking to somebody on a skateboard over a nonviolent crime when there are much more important reasons the cops need to be out there. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it to Josh to talk about why this policy was actually bad, why it could be improved on.
Well, we're glad that iteration has seen its end. So the pilot program was for 6 months. In many ways, it was sold to City Council, I think, in a way that was designed to fail. And it primarily was designed that way. I think that came from Chief Brown. One of the issues with the pilot program is it left the bulk of arrests intact. So, for example, the biggest offense, or the largest number of people that are arrested for offenses that could be cited instead of arrested, theft, I think, was the highest percentage. It was only applicable to the citizens of Dallas County. So if you live in Dallas, but you are not in Dallas County, then you would be automatically arrested or prosecuted under the old system. It wasn't streamlined. When you looked at the procedure for what an officer had to do when they encountered someone with 4 ounces or less, there were more steps in the pilot program than there are now, which included calling a sergeant out to weigh the marijuana, included having to have that signed off, and then if there was going to be discretion, then a sergeant had to sign off on the discretionary part of it to ensure that certain members of the community were not being arrested, whereas others might not be. And so the process itself became overly bulky. Again, I want to emphasize, and the reason for this was because this was a purely bureaucratic approach. Every person up to the point that it had become public was a member of city government or county government, or maybe in some level state government. There was no public input sought. There was no public input given on this issue. And so it was purely a bureaucratic conversation altogether. You had to have a valid ID, which is problematic in many ways. And it was a driver's license only. It was not a state ID, not a passport, not any other form of identification. And you would still have the arrest on your record based on how they were going to process it. And so there were a lot of problems with the pilot program. I think some of the biggest problem in the streamlined process is the chief said, this is only going to save our officers 20 minutes. Well, I don't know how many people have ever been ticketed. I don't know how many people in this room have ever been taken to jail. But if you've been one of both, I think you understand that one process is much longer than the other for the officer. And so to hear that this pilot program was only going to save about 20 minutes or shave 20 minutes off of a police officer's processing, I think was a lie. Or it's been a long time since Chief Brown's been involved in any of those processes. So I'm going to bounce back to Joe.
One more thing I'd like to note too is the problem with the ID, needing an ID, is that a lot of folks in the city of Dallas are undocumented, so this would not apply to them. The problem is logistically, if you're on the side of the road, you have to verify their identity somehow. which is why I would make the push for municipal IDs in the city of Dallas myself. But on top of that, with the sergeant coming out, I don't know if, well, I'm talking DFW NORML. 4 ounces of weed is a lot of weed. That's a lot of weed. So if you're a police officer and you cannot visualize that weed and say that's less than 4 ounces of weed, I don't know what we're doing. You know, I mean, that is, and on top of that, the entire thing was a police officer, a sergeant would have to come out, verify that yes, in fact, this is marijuana. They needed to test it. They needed to bring a testing kit, which was one of the costs of the city they were talking about. They also were talking about buying a cost for a balance to check out how much the weed actually weighed, which, you know, you look at that and you ask the question, again, like, why is it the fact that, why is it that the city of Dallas has police officers who deal with these situations at least, you know, 1,200 times a year based on their numbers? Why is it that they can't actually just be able to visualize, you know, a level of weed or marijuana and just know that this is something I'm going to give you a ticket for? On top of that, it's important to know that, and this is one of the ways this got killed in city council, this pilot program, again, pilot program, 6-month-long program, would only apply to people in the city of Dallas who also resided in Dallas County. So I don't know if y'all know the city of Dallas, but there are parts of the city of Dallas that overlap with other counties like Denton and Collin County. The chief of police was charged to not charged like criminally, but asked by city council to go to Denton and Collin County folks and try to work something out with them where they could, you know, talk about, how can we work together to figure this out? According to the chief of police, according to the chief of police again on this, several hours of discussion with county officials from Denton and Collin County, as well as county officials from the county of Dallas, they were not able to arrive at a positive conclusion, according to him, mostly because Denton and Collin County have 50 arrests over a 5-year span, right, for marijuana possession only. Now, that gets to one more problem with this policy, or this pilot program. They only included marijuana possession as an eligible offense. Now again, there were 6 eligible offenses that the state legislature allows, and in fact, marijuana possession, the numbers that the police department in Dallas runs out with on marijuana possession is dwarfed by the number of theft arrests that the city of Dallas pulls out, right? Now, if we're going to be serious about talking about ending mass incarceration, it's going to take several small incremental steps to push back on the war on drug policies, but this is absolutely necessary, and if we're going to be serious, why are we not talking about theft and every other eligible offense? I'd also like to point out a few more numbers that are based on my quick calculations. So the DPD said that there are 1,200 folks annually who would be eligible for this pilot program under arrest. Right, which includes people who would not have enhanced charges. Now, if we look at all of the people who would have been eligible for DPD arrest for every eligible offense, we're looking at 3,000 arrests per year. So more than doubling. And that's based on a conservative calculation. So if we look at the time savings that would have, based on Chief Brown's number of saying that 20 minutes is saved on every booking, and again, 20 minutes, then we would still be saving 1,000 hours annually from the police, right? And on top of that, if we look at the city of Austin, there's a man named Judge Evans who is a JP, a Justice of the Peace in Austin. He sent letters to Travis County. He said that conservatively, we're looking at 2.5 hours saved every time, an officer books somebody in the jail. So if we use like a realistic number, not 20 minutes, but really 2.5 hours, we're looking at probably 38,750 hours saved annually for the police, right? That's 15 officers, their annual, hourly pay, right? Like that, we can take 15 officers off the force if we pass that kind of policy.
Keep them somewhere else.
Or keep them somewhere else, right?
In a more useful area.
So, I think with all that in your mind, it's important to note that this bill, or this, not bill, this resolution or this pilot program was killed by the police. At least Chief Brown. And I think in some discussions we were trying to figure out, you know, why was this? What is it that, what motivated this change? And it's funny because you see Chief Brown through this process in the past 6 months. He's quoted as saying, and we saw him say, that this program is so damn practical. Yeah. In another conversation, he says, you know, I just can't agree with this because it's not going to apply to all citizens in Dallas. And so that's ultimately what killed the program. So we say all this to say it's a disappointment that the City Council didn't adopt at least a program so that we could see, a pilot program, so we could see the numbers and have some sort of analysis on what the effect would have been. So it's unfortunate that it happened. However, because we've been given this opportunity to organize and be a bigger part of the conversation, I think we can have a policy that is much deeper than what the bureaucrats were going to put into play.
Right. And again, one of the reasons that we didn't know this was going to pass, or we didn't realize it was coming up on City Council agenda, is number one, we had inside information from 3 City Council members that this was a sure thing. This pilot program was 100% going to pass. We were organizing folks to come speak out at City Council when it did come down, because everybody needs to be there when at least the pilot program passes. So 6 months later, when it's reevaluated, we can come back in droves and push for adoption of the policy and make it better, right? On top of that, this was put on an addendum, which means that they will put it on an addendum at close of business on Friday before it comes up. So it seems like they were trying to float it under the radar. And on top of that, this was killed 10-5. But based on that analysis, my professional opinion is that this was a hit job from the inside by the police department. I don't know why the chief of police wanted to kill it. I don't know if it was the Dallas Police Association pushing him. I don't know what it was, but it looks like it was a hit job from the inside. And none of those city council members who had told us we would be able to expect it to come up and they would notify us when it did, none of them told us, gave us any notice. So it was a very big surprise to me as I sat at the legislature in Austin. I got a text from Josh saying, we just got beat in city council this morning. So if we're talking about our vision for the future and what we want to do moving forward, I think it's important to note that we need to go for the full enchilada. We need to go for every eligible offense, right? Because if we do go for every eligible offense, we're not just talking about 1,200 arrests in the city of Dallas. We're talking about 15,500 arrests in the county, right? That's reducing mass incarceration. That is a big number. And that's just not a little small push. That is huge, right? And if we do it right, if we push a true program that not only takes out every eligible offense that the state of Texas allows us, but also if we make it to where convictions for theft have an ability to be expunged by diversion programs. Imagine that. Imagine if the city of Dallas is basically going to say, we don't want you to have an arrest record for a nonviolent crime and lose the possibility of work. For these eligible offenses, we're going to find some sort of diversion program where you can receive deferred adjudication, right, which is basically when you get probation, and then if you serve your probation, then they take it off your record, right? And find a way to keep you from checking a box that says, I've been arrested, when you go to apply for jobs. That's serious, and I would call that true reform, as opposed to this pilot program, which was just barely skimming the surface, if anything, right?
And I think another thing, they were only willing to go so far as to who it would be applicable to. So we're just talking about marijuana charges. It would not have applied to anyone who's been arrested for an offense before, primarily first-time offenders. And I think that we could expand the program to include quite a few more people than just that category. And I think it's absolutely necessary. And so, as we look forward, the legislature, when they put this bill together, they didn't give exactly any guidance as to what entity was supposed to enact cite and release. If it was supposed to be a county, a city thing, or what have you. So I think it's been on the book for 8 years now, 9 years now, and very few entities have even began to enact it. And I think that's a large part because of the confusion about who is supposed to lead it. You have a lot of elected officials who don't want to stick their necks out on this issue. They want to appear and remain appearing as if they're tough on crime. And the best way to do that is to keep arresting people, unfortunately. And so looking forward, some of the ideas that we have, and of course we want a full discussion and well, as full of a discussion as we can have, ideas from many people. We want to see someone that is cited and released, or cited and summoned. We want to see them have absolutely no criminal record after this process. We want to see, we've put together kind of a dream list of what the policy would look like. There would be no criminal record. There would be no arrest record. There would be no jail. Preferably no fines, fees, etc. And you would be able to do community service at the maximum, and then you would be done. Of course, we've got lots of thoughts, lots of ideas in the room, and we want to grow it from there. But that really is the premise. And I think our premise both is no one should be arrested in Dallas, no one should be arrested in Dallas County for possession, and there should also be out-of-the-box thinking and approaches to all offenses.
And I think on top of that, I don't think we should be putting people in jail who we are angry at. I think we should be putting people in jail who we are afraid of. And I'm not too terribly afraid of somebody who had like a dime bag of weed in their pocket. Now, if we are going to do this, if this is going to succeed, I will tell you now that it will never succeed if we don't learn how to talk to cops about this issue. We saw what happened when we didn't talk to cops in the right way when the cops were not on board here in Dallas. Because what's going to happen is going to be a 10 to 5 smackdown, if not worse, every single time. So this dream program that we would love to pass has to be geared towards how do we save cops time? How does the Police Officers Association here in Dallas, the DPA, how do we talk to them about making sure to reduce their hours? Because in the end, I want cops on the street to go after real crimes that could really impact communities in a violent way. So if we don't start learning how to do that, we're never going to pass this. And because of that, until we do a full analysis about exactly why this was killed, it's going to be difficult to know what the immediate next step would be in terms of which body to pass it through. Now, if it's, if we can float this on the county level and DA Susan Hawk were to say, I am not prosecuting any more of these nonviolent offenses that are eligible for cite and release, then no one in Dallas County is going to be able to turn people in like that, right? Now, the political reality of that happening is questionable, right? And we're going to have to do a power analysis about who we need to talk to and how in order to make this happen, and figure out why people weren't on board and who exactly wasn't on board. Because there's a lot of things that Chief Brown has said publicly. For example, he said the entire reason that he doesn't want to do it is because the folks who are in far, far, far North Dallas, those small group of folks who are in Denton and Collin County, but not in Dallas County, because they would not be included, he has to stand against this. Which is a firm departure. Right, it sounds good. It's a firm departure from what he was saying earlier. And to me, you can make it happen for Dallas and Denton County. There is a way to do it logistically. And if the chief of police, in my mind, was truly committed to ending the war on drugs by passing a true cite and release program, then there would have been a way found, right? So, if you have a question about, are we going to talk to Sheriff Valdez? Are we going to talk to DA Susan Hawk? Are we going to talk to the Chief of Police? I think that the answer is always yes. We need to figure out where this is going to get through in order to float this. But I can't tell you right now exactly which direction it's going to go, but I will tell you when it does come, we're going to build out the policy, and we need everybody's help building out the best policy possible.
We also need everybody's help to push the best damn policy possible. Without people involved, without people coming to speak, without people writing letters and making phone calls, we don't go anywhere. Absolutely true. Without public involvement, as what happened, it just fell silently, and there was a few headlines, and that was that. That was in their minds the nail in the coffin, but in my mind it wasn't. It was a rallying call, our Alamo, if you will, to use a euphemism. So, I don't know how many people have Twitter. Oh yeah. Before we do that, though, the primary reason, or one of the council member that pushed for this bill to die, her name is Sandy Grayson, and she has a district in far north Dallas, which is primarily, I think, totally in Denton and Collin County. And she's for Cite and Release. She said she supports the program, she thinks it's a great idea, but the moment she heard that her 5 people who or whatever get arrested per year in that area for marijuana policy, as soon as she heard it was not applicable to her district, she said, I'm opposed to this pilot program. And she was able to move the mayor, Councilwoman Gates, and Councilwoman Monica Alonso. So those 3 votes there, simply because the program is not applicable to all citizens in the city of Dallas, or the reason the program fell. So that's positive in that they're all willing to give it a go. That was their perspective, we can't get it applied to every person, so we should kill it. And that's what the mayor said, basically. It's just not fair that some citizens in Dallas will be arrested and some will be cited. And I think that's basically...
One other thing I'd like to point out is if you look at the block of city council members that are representing South Dallas, which is an area in my mind that would be highly impacted by this program, they all voted against Cite and Release. They all voted against it, and it was a huge surprise to me. I'm not from South Dallas. I don't live in South Dallas. But I would think, given the fact that so many people of color live in South Dallas and the level of poverty is so much higher in South Dallas, that this would be the first thing that you would want to defend for your constituents. So I was extremely surprised at that, and I would love to hear why it was that those folks voted against it.